Jim Morrison, frontman of the iconic rock band The Doors, remains an enigmatic figure whose influence extends beyond music into the realms of poetry, philosophy, and counterculture. Born in 1943, Morrison's life was a paradox of artistic brilliance and self-destruction. His untimely death at the age of 27 in 1971 marked the end of a tumultuous era. Yet his legacy persists, inspiring generations of artists, musicians and thinkers. This essay argues that Morrison's multifaceted genius and his defiance of societal norms have rendered him a lasting icon in both popular culture and the literary world. Through an exploration of his poetic works, his philosophical musings, and the societal impacts of his music, one can argue that Jim Morrison's contributions to art transcend his lifetime, affirming the necessity of acknowledging and celebrating his legacy in contemporary discourse. Jim Morrison was not merely a rock star, he was a poet at heart. His lyrics often bore the mark of a literary genius, employing vivid imagery, complex metaphors, and a deep understanding of the human psyche. Morrison's poetry, particularly evident in works such as The End and When the Music's Over, reflects his fascination with existential themes, death, and the spiritual quest for meaning. His writing often drew upon the influences of French symbolism and American Romanticism, showcasing a rich tapestry of influences that enriched his lyricism. Morrison's fascination with the darker aspects of the human experience is evident in his work, illustrating a unique perspective on life and death. In The End, for instance, Morrison explores themes of loss, disillusionment, and existential dread. His poetic imagery creates a haunting landscape that resonates with the complexities of human existence. The line, "lost in a Roman wilderness of pain," encapsulates this sentiment, unveiling the tumultuous interplay between desire and despair. This exploration of painful truths and human suffering not only adds depth to his lyrics, but also invites listeners to confront their own existential questions. Moreover, Morrison's poetry possesses an inherent quality of surrealism that aligns with the broader artistic movements of the 1960s, challenging conventional notions of reality. His works encouraged audiences to transcend the mundane, urging them to embrace the extraordinary and the sublime. As such, Morrison's contributions to poetry positioned him not just as a musician, but as a significant literary figure whose writings merit academic exploration. At the core of Morrison's artistry lies a deep-seated philosophical inquiry into the nature of existence, individuality, and societal constraints. Influenced by existentialists such as Friedrich Nietzsche and Arthur Rimbaud, Morrison's worldview oscillated between admiration for the individual spirit and a critique of societal norms. His famous declaration, "I am the Lizard King, I can do anything," encapsulates this ethos of defiance and liberation. It reflects his rejection of societal expectations and his embrace of the untamed self, a crucial component of the counterculture movement of the 1960s. Morrison's philosophical musings extend beyond mere rebellion. They challenge listeners to consider the implications of conformity and the quest for authenticity. His work often reflects an ambivalence towards mainstream society, a sentiment that resonates strongly with contemporary discussions on individualism and self-expression. The counterculture of the 1960s, characterized by a rejection of traditional values, found a voice in Morrison's defiance, making him a powerful symbol of a generation yearning for change. In songs like "Break On Through," Morrison explores the themes of awakening and liberation, highlighting the struggles individuals face in breaking free from the constraints of societal expectations. He encourages listeners to transcend superficial boundaries and seek a deeper understanding of themselves and their place in the world. This philosophical approach not only enhances the artistic merit of his music, but also invites audiences to engage in critical introspection, making Morrison's work a catalyst for personal and societal transformation. Jim Morrison's impact on music and popular culture is immeasurable, yet it is his role as a cultural icon that solidifies his enduring legacy. Morrison epitomized the rebellious spirit of the 1960s, challenging the status quo through his subversive lyrics, controversial performances, and charismatic persona. The Doors' music, characterized by its fusion of rock, blues, and psychedelia, served as a soundtrack to a generation grappling with rapid societal changes. Morrison's unabashed exploration of themes like sexuality, drug use, and anti-establishment sentiments placed him at the forefront of the cultural revolution. Moreover, Morrison's ability to intertwine music with a broader political and social commentary transformed the landscape of rock music. Songs like 5 to 1 resonate with the frustrations of youth disillusioned with authority and war, reflecting the anti-Vietnam sentiment that permeated the era. His confrontational performances, often laced with elements of theatre and poetic recitation, challenged conventional expectations of live music, paving the way for later artists to embrace a more boundary-defying approach to performance. The lingering influence of Morrison is evident in the work of contemporary musicians and artists who continue to draw inspiration from his oeuvre. From the punk movement in the late 1970s to the grunge revival of the 1990s, Morrison's ethos of rebellion and self-expression resonates across genres. Artists like Kurt Cobain and Marilyn Manson embody elements of Morrison's rebellious spirit, perpetuating his legacy in their own unique ways. Furthermore, Morrison's influence is not limited to the music industry. His poetry and philosophy have extended into various artistic expressions, including literature, film, and visual arts. The proliferation of Morrison's work in academic syllabi, documentaries, and biographies underscores the profound impact he has had on cultural discourse. His life and artistry continue to be scrutinized and celebrated, affirming his status as a timeless figure whose relevance extends far beyond the confines of the 1960s counterculture. However, one must also acknowledge the contradictions and complexities that define Morrison's life. His struggles with addiction and mental health, coupled with a turbulent personal life, contribute to the enigmatic aura that surrounds him. While his persona is often romanticized, it is vital to recognize the darker aspects of his legacy as well. Morrison's tumultuous journey serves as a poignant reminder of the fragility of creative genius. His self-destructive tendencies ultimately culminated in his premature death, raising questions about the price of artistic brilliance. Nevertheless, this duality only adds depth to Morrison's legacy, as it reflects the complexities of the human experience. The juxtaposition of his artistic achievements against the backdrop of his inner demons offers a lens through which to examine the intersection of creativity and mental health. In acknowledging both the brilliance and the tragedy of his life, we arrive at a more nuanced understanding of Jim Morrison, not merely as an icon of rebellion, but as a symbol of the human condition. Jim Morrison's legacy transcends the boundaries of music and poetry, securing his place as a pivotal figure in the landscape of 20th century art and culture. His profound explorations of existential themes, his defiance of societal norms, and his impact on popular culture testify to the enduring relevance of his work. As society continues to grapple with questions of identity, individuality, and authenticity, Morrison's artistic contributions resonate more deeply than ever. Celebrating Morrison's legacy is not merely an exercise in nostalgia. It is an invitation to engage with the complexities of the human experience through art. By recognizing his influence and the philosophical inquiries embedded within his work, we honor not only the artist, but also the profound and transformative power of creativity. As we continue to navigate our own societal challenges, remembering figures like Jim Morrison may provide valuable insights and inspiration, reminding us of the necessity of questioning, exploring, and ultimately celebrating the complexities of life. In an age defined by conformity and technology, Morrison's message of liberation and self-discovery remains an essential beacon of hope, urging all to break on through to the other side. James Douglas Morrison was born on December 8, 1943 in Melbourne, Florida, to Clara Clark and George Stephen Morrison. His father was a career naval officer who would eventually rise to the rank of Rear Admiral, and this military background shaped Jim's childhood in profound and complicated ways. The family moved frequently, as military families do, never staying in one place long enough for Jim to form lasting friendships or feel rooted anywhere. By the time he was in high school, the Morrisons had lived in Florida, California, Washington, D.C., and New Mexico, among other places. This constant displacement left Jim feeling like a perpetual outsider, never quite belonging anywhere, a sense of alienation that would define much of his life and art. Jim's relationship with his father was distant and strained. George Morrison was strict, authoritative, and emotionally unavailable, embodying the military discipline that governed his professional life. He expected his children to conform to his standards of behavior and decorum. And Jim, who was sensitive, intellectually curious, and increasingly rebellious, found this environment stifling. His mother was warmer, but overwhelmed by the demands of managing a household that moved constantly and raising children essentially alone while her husband was often at sea. Jim had a younger sister, Anne, and a brother, Andy, but he remained somewhat isolated even within his family, retreating into books and his own imagination. A formative experience occurred when Jim was around 4 years old. The family was driving through New Mexico when they came upon an accident involving a truck carrying Native Americans. Jim later described seeing injured and dying Native people scattered on the highway, and he became convinced that the soul of a dying Native shaman entered his body at that moment. Whether this incident happened exactly as Jim remembered it or was embellished over time is unclear, but it became central to his personal mythology. He spoke about it repeatedly, and it seemed to represent for him the moment when he became different, marked, chosen for something beyond ordinary life. Jim was intellectually precocious, reading philosophy, poetry, and literature far beyond what was typical for his age. He was drawn to Nietzsche, Rimbaud, Blake, and the French symbolist poets, absorbing ideas about the artist as visionary, the importance of excess and transgression, and the belief that conventional society was a prison from which one must escape through art and altered consciousness. By his teenage years, Jim had begun to formulate a personal philosophy that combined these literary influences with his own sense of being special and separate from ordinary people. After graduating from high school in Alexandria, Virginia, Jim enrolled at Florida State University but transferred after a year to UCLA to study film. Los Angeles in the mid-1960s was exploding with creative energy, and Jim threw himself into the counterculture scene. He experimented extensively with LSD and other drugs, viewing them not as recreational escapes, but as tools for expanding consciousness and accessing deeper truths. He wrote poetry constantly, filling notebooks with his observations, dreams, and philosophical musings. He was also drinking heavily by this point, a habit that would escalate throughout his short life. At UCLA, Jim met Ray Manzarek on Venice Beach in 1965. Jim had written some songs and sang a few for Ray, who was impressed enough to suggest they form a band. They recruited guitarist Robbie Krieger and drummer John Densmore, and the Doors were born. The band's name came from Aldous Huxley's book about mescaline experiments, The Doors of Perception, which itself was taken from a line by William Blake. The name reflected Jim's belief that music and performance could be vehicles for breaking through to higher consciousness, for opening doors in the mind that conventional society kept locked. Around this time, Jim met Pamela Corson, a young woman from Orange County who was studying art. Their relationship began in 1965 and would last in its tumultuous way until both of their deaths. Pamela was beautiful, fragile, and as drawn to excess as Jim was. They were both using drugs heavily, and their relationship was marked by intense passion, jealousy, violence, and periods of separation, followed by reconciliation. Jim called Pamela his cosmic mate, and despite his many infidelities and their constant fighting, she remained the central woman in his life. He supported her financially, buying her a boutique to run, and made her his heir, though they never legally married. The Doors achieved success quickly, signing with Elektra Records and releasing their self-titled debut album in 1967. The single Light My Fire became a massive hit, and Jim was thrust into the spotlight as a sex symbol and rock star. He was handsome in a way that was both sensual and dangerous, with his leather pants, shirtless performances, and intense gaze. Women screamed for him, and he cultivated an image as a shamanistic figure, part poet, part sex god, part prophet. But Jim was deeply ambivalent about his fame, particularly about being reduced to a pretty face and sex symbol when he saw himself as a serious artist and poet. His performances became increasingly unpredictable and confrontational. He would show up drunk or high, forget lyrics, or improvise lengthy spoken word sections that confused and sometimes angered audiences who wanted to hear the hits. He seemed to be testing boundaries, both his own and those of his audience, seeing how far he could push before something broke. In 1969, during a concert in Miami, Jim allegedly exposed himself on stage, though accounts of what actually happened vary wildly. He was charged with indecent exposure and profanity, and while the exposure charge was likely exaggerated or invented, the incident became notorious and made Jim seem genuinely dangerous rather than just theatrically rebellious. The Miami incident had serious consequences. Many concert dates were cancelled, and Jim faced the possibility of prison time. The trial, which eventually resulted in a guilty verdict that was later posthumously pardoned, added to Jim's stress and his sense that everything was spiraling out of control. He was drinking constantly, often vodka or whiskey straight from the bottle, and his weight fluctuated as his health deteriorated. The beautiful young man from the early Doors photos became bloated and bearded, looking older than his 27 years. Jim's relationship with the other members of the Doors became strained. They were frustrated by his unreliability and his drinking, and he was frustrated by what he saw as their conservatism and their inability to understand his artistic vision. Ray Manzarek remained relatively supportive, but John Densmore in particular clashed with Jim over his increasingly erratic behavior. The band continued to record, producing albums that were darker and more experimental than their early work, but the creative partnership was fraying. Jim's relationships with women other than Pamela were numerous and often brief. He had affairs with journalists, groupies, and women he met in bars. Patricia Kennelly, a rock journalist, claimed they had a Celtic hand-fasting ceremony that constituted a marriage, though Jim never acknowledged this publicly and the legal validity was questionable. Patricia later wrote extensively about their relationship, portraying Jim as brilliant but troubled, a romantic figure destroyed by his demons. Jim seemed incapable of monogamy, or perhaps simply uninterested in it, viewing relationships as experiences to be collected rather than commitments to be honored. His estrangement from his family became nearly complete. After achieving fame, Jim told interviewers that his parents were dead, a lie that hurt his family deeply when they discovered it. He seemed to want to erase his conventional military background, to present himself as having sprung fully formed into existence without the burden of a mundane past. His parents tried to reach out occasionally, but Jim kept them at a distance, perhaps unable to reconcile the person he'd become with the expectations they'd had for him. By 1971, Jim was exhausted and desperately wanted to escape the machinery of rock stardom. He and Pamela moved to Paris in March, hoping that distance from Los Angeles and the music scene would allow Jim to focus on his poetry and live more quietly. Paris offered anonymity, as Jim wasn't as famous there, and he could walk around without being recognized and mobbed. He grew out his beard, gained weight, and tried to live as a poet rather than as Jim Morrison, the rock star. But Jim couldn't escape his demons, which traveled with him to Paris. He continued drinking heavily, and he and Pamela both used heroin, though neither was a regular addict. Their relationship remained volatile, marked by passionate arguments and reconciliations. Jim was writing in his notebooks and seemed to be finding some peace. But he was also deeply depressed, perhaps sensing that he'd painted himself into a corner from which there was no escape. He'd wanted to be a serious artist, a poet, but he'd become a rock star, and the rock star had consumed the poet. On July 3, 1971, Pamela found Jim dead in the bathtub of their apartment on Rue Beautreillis in the Marais district. He was 27 years old. The official cause of death was listed as heart failure, but no autopsy was performed, which has fueled decades of speculation about what really happened. The most likely explanation, supported by various accounts that emerged later, is that Jim and Pamela had used heroin the night before, possibly heroin that was more pure than what they were accustomed to, and Jim overdosed. Pamela, panicked and probably still high herself, may have placed him in the bathtub to try to revive him before calling for help. Pamela kept Jim's death secret for several days, telling only a few people while she tried to figure out what to do. When the news finally broke, it shocked the world. Jim Morrison, the Lizard King, the poet of excess and transgression, was dead at the same age as Jimi Hendrix and Janis Joplin, completing the tragic trinity of the 27 Club. He was buried quietly in Père Lachaise Cemetery in Paris, and his grave has since become one of the most visited sites in that famous cemetery, covered in graffiti and offerings from fans who continue to worship him decades after his death. Pamela inherited Jim's estate, but she survived him by less than 3 years. She died of a heroin overdose in Los Angeles in April 1974 at the age of 27. The same age Jim had been when he died. Her death meant that Jim's estate eventually passed to his parents, the same parents he'd claimed were dead, creating a bitter irony. His family had to deal with the legal and financial complications of his legacy, while also processing their grief and their complicated feelings about the son who had rejected them. Jim Morrison's personal life was a study in contradictions and self-destruction. He was brilliant and well-read, capable of genuine insight and poetic vision, but he was also narcissistic, manipulative, and often cruel, particularly when drunk. He preached liberation and consciousness expansion, but was enslaved by alcohol and his own darker impulses. He wanted to be taken seriously as an artist and poet, but courted the very fame and notoriety that reduced him to a caricature. He spoke about love and cosmic connection, but treated the people closest to him, particularly Pamela, with a combination of devotion and destructiveness that ultimately harmed them both. His death at 27 means we only know Jim Morrison as a young man, forever frozen at an age when most people are still figuring out who they are. We don't know who he might have become had he lived, whether he would have matured into the serious poet he aspired to be, or whether the self-destructive patterns were too deeply ingrained to overcome. What remains is the music, the poetry, the mythology, and the cautionary tale of a gifted person who couldn't reconcile his aspirations with his reality, who sought transcendence through excess and found only death in a Paris bathtub, alone in the water while his cosmic mate slept in the next room, unaware that the door he'd been seeking had finally opened and let him through to whatever lies on the other side. Jim Morrison, frontman of the iconic rock band The Doors, remains an enigmatic figure whose influence extends beyond music into the realms of poetry, philosophy, and counterculture. Jim Morrison was not merely a rock star, he was a poet at heart.
Lost in a Roman wilderness of pain.
His poetry encouraged audiences to transcend the mundane, urging them to embrace the extraordinary and the sublime. Jim Morrison's legacy transcends the boundaries of music and poetry, securing his place as a pivotal figure in the landscape of 20th century art and culture.